Now, I'll admit I'm not actually the biggest podcast person. I think I tried listening to a podcast once a few years ago, and I was just like, I ended up turning it off after a few minutes. I just thought, maybe I'm just not a podcast person. It's just a person talking. I wasn't really that interested. But sometimes you can come across things that change your perception. And that's actually what happened here, because a family member sent me a link to effectively a Doctor Who drama in podcast form on the BBC Sounds website. I was like, okay, I'll give this a go. And from there I discovered Doctor Who Redacted. It's a kind of Doctor Who podcast / audio adventure that ran from the 17th of April to today, the 19th of June, 2022. And I'll be honest, I've enjoyed every single episode. There are 10 episodes of this small series, and it, as I say, it ran from 17th of April to today, the 19th of June, and it is one that I think everyone should listen to at least once. I think you'll get a good amount of enjoyment out of it. One of the things I like about it, it acknowledges the wider Whoniverse into its story, and it does have a really interesting story. So what's the story of Doctor Who Redacted? Well, you got three friends. Abby McGale, played by Lois Shimimba, Cleo Proctor, played by Charlie Craggs, and Shauna Thompson, played by Holly Quinn-Ankrah. Three girls, and they have started up a podcast together. The podcast is called The Blue Box Files, and it mainly focuses on conspiracy theories and weird happenings around the world, or around England, involving the blue box turning up. And as I said, I do love how they acknowledge the wider Whoniverse and what's gone on. For example, some of the things they end up discussing in their podcast include mysterious happenings at Wester Drumlins, which acknowledge the events of Blink, the Royal Hope Hospital disappearing, which acknowledges the events of Smith and Jones, and the happenings at Adipose Industries, which acknowledge partners in crime. And all three girls, they're in difficult circumstances, but each of them is different, and they do make it work. For example, probably the most interesting of the group is Cleo Proctor, played by Charlie Craggs. She's a trans woman who, when she came out at 16, her mother basically threw her out of the house. And she spent most of her time living with her brother Jordan, and is currently saving up for surgery working at the Queen Vic Theatre. Abby is a woman who lives in Glasgow. She's the main person who started up this podcast, but is in a bit of a tricky position because her mother is not in a great state medically, and so she has to kind of stay home to look after her mother until things get better. Meanwhile, Shauna is a lesbian and is the only woman on her computing course at a local university in Sheffield. Now, the series is written by Juno Dawson, and as I said, I do love how it acknowledges the wider Whoniverse. As well, when the girls start kind of looking into various things for their podcast, they end up in the midst of a giant conspiracy, which they find out is linked back to a person called the Doctor. And it seems that people are disappearing. For example, Cleo ends up going to talk to a journalist named Rani Chandra, voiced once again by Anjali Mohindra. And she finds out there's a lot more going on and that people are forgetting the Doctor and think people are disappearing, including Rani's parents, Haresh and Geeta Chandra, they've gone missing, as well as Graham O'Brien and Ryan Sinclair have also disappeared. And then it's kind of a race against time to find out what's going on. And as well as acknowledging things that happened within the wider Whoniverse, they also bring back a lot of kind of guest stars and their original actors as well. Like, for example, some of the other names, aside from Anjali Mohindra, who show up in the series, include Petronella Osgood, played once again by Ingrid Oliver, Kate Stewart, played once again by Gemma Redgrave, Oliver Morgenstern, played by Ben Wrighton, i.e. the doctor from the hospital in Smith and Jones, the one who tries to negotiate fair things with the Jadoon, Larry Nightingale, played by once again by Finlay Robertson. During one part, I think it's Abby who goes to interview Oliver to go and ask him what kind of happened with Royal Hope and everything. And he has to admit that after all these years, even he's not entirely certain what exactly happened. Like, he says to her, while he was fairly certain at the time that he had been to the moon and seen Rhino Men, after he published a book about it, people began to mock him, and now he's not entirely sure where he is. And later on, when she goes to try and interview Larry Nightingale, he ends up leaving her a tape saying basically, you're in danger. Anyway, things do progress from episode to episode. There's a lot of spoilers here. I'm sorry, I can't avoid that. They end up trying to find out what's going on, why people are forgetting, with Cleo being particularly frustrated when it seems she's the only person who can remember the Doctor, and everyone else is just like, who? Like, who is this Doctor? Why do you keep talking about him? And then there's betrayal, there's U.N.I.T, and it's basically a race against time to find out what's going on. And it does also link back to some great Doctor Who locations, including the Powell Estates, when Cleo and Shauna have to briefly go back there in order to try and find out what's going on after Cleo's brother and her mum end up disappearing. Now, I'll admit the only character who I kind of felt at first was a little... I don't know, they didn't get the original voice actress back for her, and for a while I was a little down about that, was partway through the series, once again, spoiler alert, they bring in Madame Vastra. Like, when Cleo and Shauna go back to the Powell Estates, they find it kind of swarming with these weird ghosts, and they're eventually saved by Madame Vastra, who tells them that she can explain what's going on. And Vastra this time is voiced by Dune Maki-chan. And I'll admit I was at first a little disheartened because, well, Niamh McIntosh is still around. I mean, you could have got her back. But then they do actually provide a good, I think, explanation why. I mean, once again, spoilers if you haven't yet seen the series. If you don't want to have this particular part spoiled for you, skip ahead about a minute, then it should be fine. But it's ultimately revealed that Vastra's wife is dead. Jenny has seemingly passed away, which, I mean, okay about that. I mean, Silurians do have presumably a rather longer lifespan than humans do, so maybe replacing Vastra's actress, maybe that does make a bit more sense, in that this Vastra is older, she's been through a lot more, and maybe that's why Niamh McIntosh didn't come back. But I kind of felt at the time, before I realised that you brought everyone else back. You brought back Gemma Redgrave, Ingrid Oliver, Anjali Mahindra, and all the others. Like, you could have made this work. But I think the main thing that sells this series for me is the three actresses, Charlie Craggs, Lois Chimimba, and Holly Quinn-Ankrah. Because, trust me, if these three girls didn't work, then the whole podcast would surely fail. But they make it work. Like, you believe the current camaraderie that the three of them have together, you believe the situations, and the three of them, they just do a great job. So trust me, while I'm sure I've spoiled some parts of it, if you haven't checked out Doctor Who Redacted, I'll leave a link down below. All 10 episodes are now available on BBC Sounds. Just check it out, have a listen, and enjoy yourself. I mean, each episode is about 20 minutes to half an hour long. Just take a listen, decide for yourselves. But I would say Doctor Who Redacted is definitely one you should check out if you get the chance. So there you go, that's my quick little review on the Doctor Who podcast, as such, Doctor Who Redacted. Anyway, till next time, see ya.